So we're headed into the end of 2022. And if you're anything like me, when you come to the end of the year, you can have some regrets. Last year you might have had all these big plans to make changes in your life, but here you are in December and you wish you had read more, worked out more, ate better, spent more time with family. And I think the same goes for us at the end of our seasons. I think we have these big plans for the culture and for ourselves. And we think at the start of the year that, hey, this is going to be the year that I take care of myself. This is the year I get more balanced. This is the year I don't get burnt out. And then we look back at the season and we recognize we have fallen back into all the same old habits of not sleeping enough, not working out, eating too much crap food, not spending enough time with our family, or just kind of falling back into some old ways of coaching, like getting after our players, blaming them, shaming them, or whatever it is that we were trying to get away from or change. Now, here's the thing, and here's why we're going to have a conversation today on the podcast around self-care, like taking care of ourselves. First, if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't be the coach and the leader our team needs. Secondly, and most importantly, if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't be the person our family needs us to be and the person that we're called to be in this world. And the reality is, how we spend our time is how we spend our lives. If we value our team, if we value our family, if we value ourselves, we will take care of ourselves. So today's episode, we're going to talk about the obstacles to taking care of ourselves in season and some practical ways that we can get back on track, not just next year, not just next season, but get back on track right now, today. At the end of this episode, I'm going to share with you a 60-second daily habit that's going to transform you in your life. So be sure to stick with this episode all the way to the end. Welcome to the Coaching Culture Podcast. I'm JP Nerman, the founder of TOC Culture Consulting, which provides coaching for coaches and practical online resources for coaches to help them become better leaders and build better cultures. I'm joined by my friend and co-host Nate Sanderson. If you want the notes to this and every episode of the podcast, subscribe at tocculture.com to our weekly newsletter. Also, if you're looking for a book in the new year, a book that can help you reset yourself as a leader, reset your culture, check out The Culture System, a proven process for creating an extraordinary team culture. It's available on Amazon and Audible. You can learn more about it at myculturesystem.com. Now let's get into today's conversation. If I reflect on my experience or my journey as a coach, and I also, kind of reflect on the coaches that I've worked with, when things start to break down with the team, you lose a few tough games, the culture seems to be slipping, practice energy seems to be low. Oftentimes we want a tactical fix, a technical fix to the issue, or maybe we look at the players and we kind of point the finger there and we look to blame them for that lack of energy or things slipping in the culture. But my own reflections on my own experiences, things have already started to probably slip within my own coaching, within my own self. My energy is low. The season's wearing on me. It's not just wearing on the players. I'm not taking care of myself. My mental health is struggling. I'm handling those 3-4 losses in a row just as bad, if not worse, than my players are handling it. And so I think this is the time when self-care, taking care of ourselves, doing all those things that help us to be at our best are more important than ever, is that we're still making time for those things and still following through with those things so that we can be the coach and the leader that our team needs.
Well, JP, I can relate to all of that in terms of where we're at in our season, about a third of the way through here. And, to me, it's really the time of year to be tired. I'm tired. People ask, how are things going? Things are going well, pretty well, all things considered, but I just feel exhausted, and we're only a third of the way through. And some of that is, we're on a 3-game losing streak. We've lost 3 close games to 3 really good teams. The last one, felt like I didn't give my team the best chance to be competitive on the last 2 possessions just because of what we called or what we tried to draw up. And so, of course, that happened Friday night. We lose on a buzzer beater, more or less. And, so I don't sleep very much that night. I'm in my assistant coach's basement till 2:30 in the morning, come home, get to bed about 4, get up at 6:30 the next day to get ready for practice that morning, and when you have a night of 2 or 3 hours of sleep, or you do that a couple times, then that torpedoes the next couple of days. Now I'm not as fresh around my family and I'm distracted anyway. And so it just becomes, of course, the proverbial grind, as everybody likes to describe it. But one of the things that I was thinking about as we were getting ready for this episode is, thinking through just the calendar year and when I feel at my best or most refreshed, or I'm really just enjoying, life. I love the way I feel in April. We get through the season and the state tournament and the postseason, and the banquet is always the last Sunday of March for us. And, the sun's coming out. It's springtime. I'm outside. I'm walking. I'm sleeping more. I'm exercising more. My kids don't have a lot going on, so we're hanging out more. And I just think to myself, like, man, I wish I could feel like that during our season when I get to do the thing that I really enjoy most, which is be around our players every day. But as you said, that they're not getting the best version of me when I'm hungover from a lack of sleep or stressed out because of the next opponent, or what I feel like I screwed up on Friday night. And that is a difficult it's just difficult to navigate that for lots of reasons that we'll talk about here today.
Yeah, Nate, I was watching a pretty interesting documentary on Netflix called Stutz, and it's Jonah Hill and his therapist, and they're kind of going through some of the tools that the therapist had used with Jonah Hill through some of his mental health challenges and depression. And I love this pyramid he talks about. It's nothing new, but it was framed very nicely. At the bottom of the pyramid was the body, the middle was the social connections, the top was the self, and the body is pretty self-explanatory. It's just those big three things around exercise, sleep, and nutrition, which obviously sleep becomes harder to get. Making time for exercise is hard to make time. And then eating, especially when you're traveling, you're on the road, like you can really fall off the wagon there in season. And then above that is the social relationships. Are we spending time with the most important people in our life, our family, close friends? I mean, I've even seen in some coaching environments, you would say, oh, there's loads of social connection within the team and the fellow coaches, but people get so caught up in the X's and O's, the tactical and the film watching, that they're really not connecting as people. They're just connecting, as coaches and players, and it just becomes very much about the job. And I think, that coaches still lack that social connection, even in those settings. And lastly is that self, and that could look like a lot of different things. I think in the self, from therapy to just even mindfulness practices, meditation. For me, journaling, writing out different things and thinking and reflecting on my own thinking is huge. Many of our coaches we work with are obviously doing our mentoring coaching program. Those weekly calls are really important. And then even reading, like in season, I think I'm a big advocate of coaches reading things that are going to, what I would say, fill their cup. Just maybe it's inspirational, maybe it's some encouragement stuff, not heavy content, but just some light reading stuff that just continues to give good messages, to the coach, things that are great reminders of what they need in season. So I really love that pyramid of just body, social, and self. And I think it's kind of a good framework for us to kind of reflect on when it comes to this self-care and maybe where we might be falling short.
Well, JP, I think the first thing that I would encourage coaches when you hear about this pyramid is to start thinking about, when time starts to become more precious. So you got a 3-game week, or you've got, film you got to watch, and you got to do the stats from the other game, and you've got to get practice ready, and you have all these things that are going on that are demanding your time. What do you sacrifice first from that pyramid? When I look at it from my own personal perspective, it's I start at the top, and the things that I normally would do for myself, whether it's going for a walk, or it's, I like to find things that just help me escape during the basketball season. So whether that's I'm reading a book, a biography of Bo Jackson, there's nothing inspirational about it. There's nothing that I'm learning from it. It's just a way to get my mind off of basketball and something else. My wife and I are watching Yellowstone when we can. That's an escape for us, But when things get really busy, I don't do those things. I don't take a walk with the dogs for 10 minutes because I'm thinking about other things. And then, there are times where things get really busy, and those social connections, even whether it's on the team or it's outside of the team, I'll start with on the team, I reflect on going through a practice, and, we knock it up with our players and greet them when they come in. And then maybe I've talked to 2 or 3 players during the course of the hour and a half that we're together, and then we're gone. And then I think back to my why, and I think back to my purpose, and I think back to what I really enjoy most about coaching. It's the chance to just hang out with kids, and be able to talk to kids. And here I am, I'm even missing those opportunities because I'm so focused on how are we going to handle this half court trap. They run 8 out of bounds plays, JP. We can't stop any of them. We don't run any of our baseline out of bounds plays very well, and so the list just keeps growing of all the things that I want to get done in that limited time. And I start to miss the relational aspect of just being together, and taking moments for that. And that says nothing about, relationships on the home front when you're coming home because you're talking to your coaches after practice for an extra 10 or 15 minutes. So then you get home, you miss dinner, and you're putting kids to bed. I'm dropping them off in the morning, and I have almost, very little quality contact between those two times of day, depending on our schedule, because again, I just let other things creep in and demand my attention. So, thinking through where we sacrifice and is that really the best place to sacrifice, I think is what we really want to get into today, because as you'll suggest here, and as we talk, that there are other things perhaps we need to be thinking about that we shouldn't be doing in order to protect those important things on that pyramid that value our body, our social relationships, and ourselves.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest issues for coaches when it comes to these things kind of falling off and their own self-care throughout the season is that we are trying to be great at everything else within our team. And I often kind of compare this to, me as a coach. I think for years when it came to my coaching, I wanted us to be the best rebounding team, the great shooting team. We wanted great out of bounds. We want to be good at every aspect of the game. And what I consistently heard from the great coaches is you can't be great at every aspect of the game. You have to pick a few areas that you're going to be great at. And you have to be willing to say, hey, we're just not going to be great at these other things. We're not going to be maybe even good at these other things. We know that at the end of the day, we may lose some games because, we're not great at the press break, or we're not the best shooting team, whatever it is. But we know that this is what we're just committed to being really good at. And it's going to give us the best chance to reach our potential within our circumstances. And I think this is the same for our lives. Like, I think the reality is we have to be willing to make sacrifices rather than answer the question, what am I willing to do to be successful? I think sometimes we have to say, hey, what am I willing to fail at or give up in order to be successful at what matters most in our life and what matters most in our coaching. And that question of what we're willing to give up or what we're willing to fail at, like that's a hard thing, because back to that whole thing, if we want to be great at everything, we want to just knock it all out of the park. And that can be a big, big challenge for us to overcome as coaches.
I think one of the challenging things for me in my 4th rebuild now in my career here, as we're starting in Mount Vernon in year 2 this year, is that I have all these great ideas, things that have worked in other places, of things I've seen other coaches do. You start looking at the totality of the program, and you get, great ways to organize your youth and connect them to the high school and what you want to do for your gear and your scouting, and you go through all the things that we think have to be done for a program to be successful year in and year out. And the hardest thing for me to accept here is that I can't do it all, and I can't do it all well. So I look at, you're talking about all the things that we have to do as coaches. Like, here's a short list of stuff that I got to get done this week. We got to finish a round of one-on-ones. We got t-shirts coming back. We got to get out. We got scouting for 2 games. I'm trying to clip film, both to learn from our stuff and to get us ready for our opponents. We're trying to get our shooting ladder organized so that all of our kids know what their PRs are. We've got 3 practices to plan for. We have a youth tournament coming up on Saturday that I need to both coach the 3rd grade and the 8th grade and organize all of the concession workers for. We've got cookie dough orders that are coming back in the middle of the week that have to be handed out. And our 8th grade season is ending on Thursday. So we have to find a way to assimilate them into our high school practices starting on Friday. That's just the next 5 or 6 days. And I think about that, and I want to do every single one of those things well, like perfectly, like better than anybody else does at our school. When I look at that list, and it's not possible. Like, it all has to get done to a certain extent, but it's been really hard to let go of this idea that I know this could have been done better, because I feel bad about that. I don't love the way our t-shirts turned out this year, but I didn't put enough time into it. We didn't sell enough cookie dough. I'm not sure if I'm going to find enough workers this weekend. And I know it could be better. And I think that's one of the things that it makes it so challenging when you talk about, look, if we're going to protect the things in our life that are supposed to be most important, this body, social, and self, then there are things within the program or the responsibilities of the head coach that are going to have to change for me to be able to prioritize my own self-care during the season. Well, why don't we do that? If we were to sit back and say 10 years from now, are you going to be frustrated because, you didn't have enough youth workers or you didn't have the right inbounds plays for your third grade team on Saturday at their tournament? Or are you going to be frustrated because, you missed out on 3 or 4 days to hang out with your kids, or they turn 9 and you weren't aware of their year 8, because you're so busy. And I think that one, we have to think about that in perspective a little bit, but two, we also have to be real about why is it do we want everything to be perfect? And I think number one, I just know this from my own personal experience is like, I look at other programs at our school. I look at other programs in our league. I look at other programs in our area and I think they're doing this better than we are. And I know we could do it better. And so just that the knowledge of that gap eats at me because I know we could be better here, here, and here, right? I know that when we again, did our t-shirts this year, just as an example, things we put on social media, it's not perfect. It could be better. And that bothers me. I feel like I'm letting people down. Friday night when we didn't do great on our last two possessions that really decided the game. I mean, I felt like that was on me. And I honestly don't care that much about winning and losing, but it feels awful because I feel like I let my kids down. I didn't give them the best chance, or I let the fans down, or it's a chance for us to beat a ranked opponent, whatever it might be. I just feel like I let people down because I didn't do my job as well as I could. And so, all of those things consciously or subconsciously sort of guilt us into another hour, doing more here, doing less at home, doing less with my kids, doing less, with my wife, whatever it might be. And we justify it by saying it's just this week. JP, it's just a busy week. But guess what? My list is going to be just as long next week as it is this week. And all the stuff I don't get done now is going to carry over. It's not enough just to say, I'm going to sacrifice, for this week or this month or this season because we miss too much of the important things when it comes to ourselves.
And I can imagine that thought of letting people down becomes a motivation, like you said, for a lot of hours, extra hours. Well, I got to watch more film so I don't let them down. And that then leads to you not getting sleep or you're not getting your workout in or do all the things you need to do to take care of yourself. You end up making sacrifices in that moment that, hey, maybe it does contribute to you to be a little bit more prepared for the next game, but your energy is lower and it just adds up and it adds up and adds up. And it's not just affects the team, but it affects your own joy and fulfillment within coaching, which is really tragic, honestly, at the end of the day. And so the question I think we're left is, right, how can we cut back on certain things or how can we remove things? And one of the big focuses I would encourage coaches to do is to say, hey, how can I just do the best I can with the time that I have and be really clear on how much time you're willing to commit to these things within each week, within each day, within a season. And we have to be we have to really look back and say, okay, what is possible? And this is why the habit for me of time blocking every night, sitting down and saying, okay, tomorrow, how will I schedule and structure my day so that it's in line with my values? Because if I don't structure my day, I don't say, hey, I'm going to work on this from 2 to 4. Or if a coach doesn't say, hey, I'm going to do film, from 8 to 9. Well, all of a sudden they'll be doing film. They might be 8 to 11, right? They just keep going with it, going with it, going with it. And it's just, and all of a sudden that they're not spending time with their family, or not getting the workout in, they're not getting the sleep when they should have. So I think really honestly, it's what time do I have? What time am I willing to commit to these certain things to create this balance? And when we do that, I would argue that, instead of watching the 3 hours of film at night to prepare yourself and prepare your team, or like I was a couple of years ago, I was taking 2-3 hours to plan practice. When in really, if I had just said, you've got 30 minutes, that 30-minute time block would have helped me have greater focus. And the practice would probably have been just as good. If we can get into certain tasks and all of a sudden, like we don't even know where the time went. All of a sudden we've watched 4 hours of film, or we spend 3 hours playing a 90-minute practice, which is just, outrageous, right? So it's setting these restrictions, these boundaries around our time and planning our days out can be an absolute game changer for coaches.
One of the obvious ways to get some of these things off of our plate, JP, is just to delegate, right? And the most obvious people to do that with would be your assistant coaches. And if I was being totally honest, for a lot of my career, I was resistant to do that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I felt guilty because they're busy too. They've got family at home. They're teaching in the school. They got full-time jobs. It's not like they're just sitting around twiddling their thumbs with nothing to do. And I didn't want to have to add more to their plate just to get it off of mine. And truth be told, there are times where we think as head coaches, if I give this thing and they haven't done it before, I don't know if it's going to be done right. Am I going to just have to go back and do it again? Or am I going to have to edit the scout? Or am I going to have to add to the film? And so there's a piece of that where the quality maybe becomes a question mark in our mind, at least, about whether or not they can do the job, adequately enough or as well as we might do it ourselves. So one of the things that's helped me with that is having a conversation with our staff before the season of just asking them when things come up and I need something done or I need to get something off of my plate. What is the best way for me to communicate that or to be able to do that with you guys? And my assistants at both of my last two schools were really proactive about, Coach, as soon as you need something, let us know, put us all on the text, and then we'll figure it out. But when you wait till the last minute and 6 hours from now, you need 12 dice, 3 decks of cards, and, 2 Uno decks because you want to do some team building activity, that's really tough. If we know that ahead of time, we'd love to be able to help. And our schedules are different. So just put it in there and let us figure it out. That was a game changer for us. That was huge. One, I didn't feel as guilty. Two, they were able to negotiate it amongst themselves and make sure that those things get done. Another thing that's been helpful for me now at Mount Vernon is to look outside of our staff for people that are willing to do things. So last year we had a parent of a senior, a mom that she wanted to host team dinners. She wanted to decorate the locker room. Like she wanted to do some of these things that, other programs do a lot of around our school. And so unleashing her to sort of organize those things and me just sort of washing my hands a little bit and saying, go ahead and take it. Let me know if you need anything from me. That was great because she was willing to add some things, to the experience that I certainly couldn't do, but the kids really appreciated. So thinking about who are the stakeholders that might be able to take some stuff. We have former players now that are in graphic design that are helping with our social media. So I don't have to do that as much. We've delegated out our scouting reports so that our assistants are doing it once every other week. I'm still editing, and adding a few thoughts here and there, but I've learned to let go of that a little bit more, give them plenty of lead time, give them the film that they need. And that's been good. We've got some volunteers that aren't even quote unquote on the staff that help with that from time to time as well. So maybe thinking outside the box and again, letting a little bit go in terms of the standard by which we expect it to be done when someone else is trying to help us, I think can help facilitate some of that delegation to be a little bit more effective.
And I would just add one thing there too. I think when we delegate, when we give them stuff, the reality is the inexperienced coaches are probably, assistants are not going to do as good of a job as us. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't still delegate it. It just means that our role is to coach them through that and escape, whether it's they got to lead a part of practice, right? Or they were the lead on a scouting report. Okay, it's going through that scouting report with them, giving them feedback, and just trying to coach them through that. And I think that's a really important piece. I had the privilege, I think you did as well, where me and you haven't spent a lot of time as assistant coaches. So when we failed with certain things, we took more ownership of it. When like the scouting report didn't work, it's like, well, it's all back on us, right? So I think we learned quickly in those situations, whereas a lot of times assistant coaches, they maybe feel that sense of ownership that the head coach feels. So they need a little bit more coaching through those type of things. I mean, I still think we need coaching as well as head coaches, but I just think that that's one aspect that might affect that. The other thing is it's just kind of improving your systems around things, like so that you're not wasting as much time. Like first off, we're really bad at running effective meetings. And so I think if we can say, hey, we only have 15 minutes to meet as a staff, or we have 30 minutes to meet as a staff, and sticking to that. And then instead of dragging the meeting on longer, we say, okay, we didn't get through everything. So how can we more effectively run that meeting so we actually get to all the stuff that we need to get to in the future instead of just adding more time to it? Another one would be just practice reflection. I've seen coaches that they would sit around after every practice or game and everyone goes around a circle and shares their thoughts and just, hey, let's all go home. Let's get with our families. Some stage tonight in the group chat, just drop in your thoughts and your reflection, or answer these questions for reflection. And that way then I can plan practice, or I can make adjustments, or I can focus on the film breakdown on certain things that you guys share. So just changing your whole system. And I think the last thing I'd share is just kind of getting outside the box and honestly being willing to sacrifice sacred cows. And just one example there, I was just working with Sean Keating and his program, St. Peter up in Minnesota, and they're going to take a whole week off at the Christmas break. Now that's very, very untraditional in a high school program, especially one in like Minnesota where they have probably a shorter high school season than the average high school in America. But the whole thing is like he believes his team's going to come back more recharged. He's going to get that family time that he needs, and it's going to justify maybe some longer weeks that they're going to go through in the season, is that they get this full week off where they all can be engaged with their family. And it's really untraditional. It may not be the solution for every program, but the idea is be willing to do things differently than everybody else. And you kind of have to get over what people say about it, because a lot of coaches might say, well, if I did that, I would, what would the parents say? What would the players say? What would people think? And it's like, hey, just be willing to be different, knowing that you have a bigger purpose or intention in mind. And another example of, sacrificing these sacred cows that I can think of too is just even the collegiate level. I think, there's so much conversation around recruiting and, well, I have to go to this and, to this tournament or go travel here to so many events throughout the year. And the reality is, I talk to all these coaches and it's just like, how much is this actually, if everyone's doing it, is it actually really at the end of the day benefiting you? And once again, it may not be the answer. Maybe you do need to be at every event of every weekend in the recruiting calendar, or maybe you could just be a little bit different and just focus on a few events or recruit less players. But whatever it is, it's just being willing to say, how can we do things differently here? How can we be more efficient with our time?
Well, JP, I think one thing you're alluding to there is that we don't always know the benefit of the time that we're spending. In other words, whether it's going to recruiting events or it's spending an extra hour, 30 minutes of practice time, or, if we would have spent 15 more minutes watching film, would that have made the difference or not? I think if we start just asking ourselves those questions a little bit more frequently, did we really need that meeting? Could that meeting have been 15 minutes shorter and we still would have got out of it what we need? I think about our shooting ladder is somewhat involved and there's a lot of stat tracking and we've got to enter a bunch of numbers into a spreadsheet and keep it updated for kids to really know where they're at and how they're improving. How much does that help their confidence? I'm not sure. It feels like it does, but I don't know, so that's something that we're going to ask about in exit interviews at the end of the year. Is it worth the investment of time, or is there a better way to do it, a faster way to do it? I think of social media. I spend after our games half hour, whatever, writing up kind of a summary of the game for our Facebook page. And then I look and see we have 100 people that looked at it, or 100 impressions, whatever it might be. Like, is that justify that time? I'm not sure. So could somebody else do that? Is there a better way to do it? All of these things I think are worth asking as we're trying to find greater efficiencies. Here's the last thing I'll leave our listeners with. You talked about time blocking before as guardrails for the amount of time we're spending on the tasks that need to be done for our job. I think back to the times in a season when I have felt the best or I have enjoyed the most. I can remember nights where I've said, I am not taking my computer out of my bag tonight. I'm not bringing homework home from school. When I get home at 6:30 and we're having dinner, I am not doing a single thing related to basketball or teaching until tomorrow morning. And just blocking little chunks of time, maybe it's an evening, maybe it's a lunch with your kids, maybe it's a Saturday morning. That can be as refreshing, in the middle of a really busy season as anything else, because now your brain has an excuse to relax a little bit. You can plug in, tomorrow you'll take care of it. But finding times to block out just get away from it all, even if it's just for a few hours, I think can be incredibly beneficial as well.
Nate, your story about leaving the laptop in the car, it's powerful. A lot of coaches won't leave the laptop in the car or put the phone away in the evening because they're worried about letting others down, right? They feel the need to be on call 24/7, to be on Coach Twitter, to answer every email, to respond to every text, and to answer every phone call. But the question, another question I think we need to ask, we've been asking a lot of questions in this episode, but another question is, who are you willing to let down? At some point, you may have to let the fans down, the parents down, or potentially even your players down, or you're going to end up letting down your children or your spouse. And I know that question has been great for me the last year as I've made the choice to cut back on work during the week. I've even cut back on the amount of trips I take to work with teams and to speak to coaches and do workshops. I've passed up a lot of these opportunities. Probably let some people down in the process. But I set this boundary with my wife on what is a healthy amount of time to be away from the family and evenings to be working. And it comes back to that question is I just, 5-10 years from now, heck, at the end of the year, I don't want to look back at regrets that I've let down the most important people in my life. Now, at the start of this episode, I promised to share a 60-second daily habit that could transform your life. And here it is. It's a daily journal where you do two things. First, you reflect on your day. And secondly, you track your habits. I use the James Clear Habits Journal. And I promise you, I'm not getting paid to promote his journal, though I think I should be. You don't have to use this journal. You could use this, do the same thing in a normal notebook. But in the journal, I take 10 to 20 seconds to write out what I did that day in just one line. One line, that's all. Just reflecting on the main points of the day. And then I look at the back of the journal, I have around 15 things that I want to try to do more of, I want to do less of, or I want to do every day. And these are behaviors or disciplines that are connected to my values and my areas for growth. So currently in December, I'm tracking mindfulness, morning journaling, reading to learn, like informative reading, journaling in the evening, daily prayer, amount of hours I sleep, time blocking, no sugar, no losing my temper, and no alcohol days. Now, I'm not perfect at these. Honestly, some of those I'm not trying to be perfect at. I'm just trying to cut back on certain things or do more of certain things. And to continue being honest with you, there are months where I might not check off but one or two of those boxes. Like I may not only do those things once or twice. I'm getting better at that. But the important thing is I'm reflecting every day. I'm reflecting every single day. And I'm able to troubleshoot, every single day about how I can be better and make adjustments. And then going into the next month, I'm able to say, hey, are these things that I still need to be doing to be my best and to grow myself? And sometimes, there's one of those habits that I try to put on there and I struggle to implement them in my life. And I say, that actually isn't that important. And so I always try to add or subtract one or two things each month, honestly, and to continuously refine, these daily disciplines, these habits. Now, this ritual or reflecting on the day, this habit tracking, in total, it takes around 60 seconds. And you can do it at the start of the day or at the end of the day. And it's really, really powerful because rather than get to the end of the year or the end of the season and feel like, dang it, I totally fell off track. You just get to the end of the day and you say, dang it, I totally screwed that day up. Or just the opposite. You say, wow, I nailed it. I made today a masterpiece. And you can kind of celebrate that day. Either way, it helps you to continuously be taking small steps to take care of yourself and to making incremental changes to improve yourself. And that is the most important change we can make as a leader this upcoming year. It's all with us. It starts with us. If we don't make the change within ourselves, we can't expect other people around us to be making changes as well. All right, that's it for today's episode. If you're looking for a book to really better understand yourself as a leader, your values, and how to build aligning disciplines, be sure to check out my book, The Culture System. Part 1 of the book goes deep into this and helps you design your own personal system to grow yourself and take care of yourself.